It began in the quiet spaces between childhood and war, in the kind of ordinary town that never expected to be the front line of anything. A place of shopping malls, school cafeterias, and sleepy neighborhoods, where 5 kids walked home one night under a sky crowded with stars and came face to face with something that shattered everything they knew about the world. Jake, Rachel, Cassie, Marco, and Tobias. Just names, just teenagers. But in a moment they were changed. Not in the way growing up changes you, slowly and invisibly, but all at once, brutally, irrevocably. A dying alien, Elfanger, stumbled from the wreckage of a sleek, silver ship and gave them a gift and a burden, the power to morph, to become any creature they could touch, to become animals. And a warning, the Yeerks were already here. They looked like humans. They lived inside your head, a parasitic race, slug-like things that slid into your brain through your ear and made your body their puppet. And they were spreading, infecting neighbors, teachers, police, family. Already too many had fallen. Already the invasion was well underway. There would be no reinforcements, no cavalry, no governments to rally behind them. The Andalites, the alien race Elfanger had come from, would not return soon. It was up to the 5 of them, children with a power they barely understood, facing an enemy older, stronger, more ruthless than anything they could imagine. But they fought, in forests and cities, in schools and alien ships, in open skies and deep oceans. They fought. Each morph was a weapon, each transformation a risk. Minutes ticking in their heads, knowing if they stayed too long in a morph they would be trapped forever. Some came close. One did not escape. Tobias, who touched the sky as a hawk and never truly came back. Perched above a world that no longer made room for him, he watched with sharp eyes and a soul torn between what he was and what he could no longer be. Cassie, whose heart broke 1,000 times for every animal she became, every life she protected, every truth she couldn't unsee. Marco, laughing through the pain, hiding the weight of loss behind sarcasm and planning. Rachel, fierce and golden, a storm in human form, fearless in battle, but always dancing on the edge of something darker. And Jake, who carried leadership like a wound, who bore the choices no child should ever make. They weren't alone, not always. Allies came and went. Axe, the Andalite, Elfanger's brother, young and brilliant and bewildered by human life, became their friend, their comrade, their mirror. He brought knowledge and pride, but also pain, for in him they saw what they had lost, what they could become. And the Yeerks were not faceless. Visser III, monstrous and brilliant, held Elfanger's memory like a trophy. He could morph too, but what he chose to become were horrors from the edge of galaxies. Others, more hidden, played subtler games. Human controllers with human families. Friends, hosts that screamed silently, locked inside their own minds. The fight was not just against aliens. It was against fear, against betrayal, against their own slow loss of innocence. They became spies, warriors, killers, and the line between what they fought and what they became grew thinner every day. But they did not stop, because behind every corner, in every hallway, in every shadowed smile, the Yeerks waited, and if they didn't fight, no one would. So the war continued, and 5 kids carried the weight of a planet on their shoulders, hoping it wouldn't break them first. There were moments when they almost believed it could end. Fleeting victories that tasted like freedom, a rescue, a sabotage, a mission pulled off with seconds to spare. For a heartbeat, the world felt saved. But the Yeerks always adapted. They were tireless. They were many, and they had been planning this invasion for decades. Tom, Jake's brother, was one of them, a hollow echo of the boy he had been, the perfect disguise for the parasite that lived within. Jake fought every day knowing the enemy was inside his own home. The others, too, knew this cost. Marco's mother, gone for years, was not dead. She was Visser one of the highest-ranking Yeerks in the galaxy. The war was not distant. It sat beside them at dinner. It waved at them from driveways. It smiled in school photos. Each battle was a brush with death. And every time they morphed, they left a part of themselves behind. The hawk, the wolf, the bear, the tiger, the dolphin. They became the animals they chose. They felt what the animals felt. Rage, hunger, fear. Sometimes they struggled to come back. Rachel began to chase the fight, not because she was bloodthirsty, but because she was losing herself. The lines blurred. The girl she was, the gymnast, the cousin, the friend, faded behind the warrior. Cassie, heartbroken by the damage they caused, stepped back more than once, trying to hold on to something pure. But the war never stopped. Not for guilt, not for love. Tobias watched it all from the sky. A red-tailed hawk with a human mind, trapped in feathers and instinct. He had been human once. He still remembered laughter, friendship, the weight of books in a backpack. But he hunted now. He killed to survive. And every day, the hawk grew stronger while the boy grew quieter. Axe, loyal to his people but bound to his new friends, faced a torment of identity. The Andalite code was strict, but the Animorphs had saved his life, had fought beside him. He called them Shorm, a word that meant more than friend. It meant part of one's own self. And slowly, painfully, he came to see Earth not just as a battlefield, but as a home worth saving. The Yeerk Pool was a place of nightmares. Hidden beneath a nondescript building, it was a vast underground chamber where Yeerks left their human hosts to bathe in Kendrona rays, essential to their survival. The Animorphs struck it more than once, risking everything to delay the invasion. Each time they succeeded, they saw more pain, more fear, more innocent humans screaming inside their own minds. But even victories came with cost. There were those who died. David, a boy who briefly became one of them, brought chaos and betrayal. His hunger for power twisted him. In the end, he became a rat, trapped in Morph, alone forever. A warning etched deep into their hearts. Not everyone could handle the weight of war. And always Visser III loomed, his presence a specter of cruelty and cunning. He did not just want to win. He wanted to break them, to find their names, their families, their hope. But they held the line, again and again. The Animorphs became legends in whispers, rumors of mysterious animals appearing in places they shouldn't, of accidents that weren't, of attacks that left no trace. But no one could truly believe, because to believe would be to accept that Earth was under siege, that the enemy was inside. Still, they fought, with broken sleep and aching bones, with dreams haunted by screams and shapes not their own. They laughed less, they aged faster, but they fought, because freedom, they learned, isn't free. It's clawed for, bled for, held together by the hands of those brave enough to say no, even when the world refuses to listen. And the war was far from over. They began to see the shape of something larger. Whispers turned to signals. Missions revealed plans. There was an underground Yeerk movement, one led by a Yeerk named Aftran, who questioned the morality of enslaving others. Cassie found her, spoke to her, took a chance that none of the others were willing to take. And in that act, she gave up her morphing powers to show trust. Cassie was restored eventually, but the moment shifted everything. Not all Yeerks were monsters. Some just wanted freedom like the Animorphs did, planted doubt and hope in equal measure. The resistance grew. Hork-Bajir, once enslaved warriors under Yeerk control, escaped to hidden valleys, led by Jarahimi and Ket Halpak. With help from the Animorphs, they began to reclaim their future, blade by blade. The group saw that war wasn't always about fighting. Sometimes it was about saving those who could still be saved. But the price of resistance was rising. The Yeerks introduced the morphing cube to the Earth, threatening to give the power of morphing to thousands of controllers. It would make the invasion unstoppable. The Animorphs had to intercept it, steal it, hide it, and in doing so, they triggered a chain of escalation that led to war on a scale they had never seen. Marco faced his mother again. As Visser One, she had orchestrated some of the darkest moments of the invasion. But in a moment of chaos, torn between Yeerk and human, she chose to fall rather than be recaptured. Her fate was never certain. For Marco, the wound was real either way. Rachel changed. Her fire burned hotter. She stopped waiting for the war to end and began to meet it head-on. More than once, she was the first to volunteer for missions no one else would. She walked through fear like it was smoke. And Jake changed most of all. He became what he had to, strategic, ruthless. He ordered attacks that left others dead. He made choices that haunted his sleep. In silence, he carried the weight of the team, even when no one else saw it, especially then. Tobias discovered the truth of his lineage. Elfangor was his father, the Andalite who had given them their powers, the alien prince who had died for them. The revelation did not change who Tobias had become, but it gave shape to the emptiness in him, and it connected him to Axe in a way no one else could understand. The final battles loomed. The Animorphs were no longer children. They had become symbols. They had become tools. The Andalites finally returned, and with them came the cold weight of military calculation. The Andalite fleet was willing to destroy Earth to stop the Yeerks. Billions of lives, human and Yeerk alike, were expendable. Jake made his choice. He tricked the Yeerks into gathering aboard their main pool ship. And when they were all together, when victory seemed near, he gave the order. A virus had been planted, one that would destroy all Yeerks, and as the ship fell, thousands died. Rachel was aboard. She was the only one who could stop Tom, Jake's brother, who had led the Yeerks into the trap. She succeeded, but she did not come home. Her death was the final line they crossed, the last price. The war ended. Earth was free. But none of them were. Axe stayed with the Andalites. Cassie worked to heal the planet. Tobias vanished to the skies, a hawk once more. Marco became a celebrity. Jake drifted. Until the call came again. Axe was missing, gone in deep space, and something terrible was rising from the ashes of the old war. Jake gathered a new crew. Tobias returned. Marco followed. A final mission. A new enemy. One last chance to make it mean something. And so they flew. Toward another unknown. Toward another war. Because the fight for freedom never really ends. And some warriors never stop fighting. The stars stretched before them, silent and cold. Deep space was a void of black impossibility, and into that void flew the last remnants of Earth's defenders. Jake sat in the command chair of a stolen Andalite ship, his eyes distant. Marco joked. Tobias watched, and the silence of what they'd lost hung between every breath. They were heading toward something dark. Axe had gone to investigate a signal from a species called the One. He hadn't returned. The Andalites refused to act. Cassie stayed behind to work within the new peace. But Jake, Marco, and Tobias couldn't rest. The journey was long, lonely. The universe, it turned out, held more than just Yeerks and Andalites. There were others, civilizations hidden behind nebulae, pirates drifting in scavenged ships, empires born from the ashes of wars long forgotten. The Animorphs had changed the fate of Earth, but they were unknown here. just another anomaly crossing the void. They fought their way through ambushes and betrayal. They traded favors and information. They followed the faint trace of Andalite code, hoping it would lead to Axe. And then they found him. But Axe was not the same. He had been captured, altered, subsumed by the One. The creature was like nothing they had ever faced. It was Yeerk-like in its parasitism, but more advanced. A collective intelligence, a single mind born from many consumed ones. The One did not enslave. It erased. It merged. It devoured identity. Axe had been merged into this being, and he spoke not as Axe, but as a voice among many. Cold, efficient, dangerous. Jake was faced with a decision. Kill what remained of their friend, or try to reach him. Tobias believed there was something left. Marco, ever the realist, doubted it. But Jake hesitated. He remembered the boy who had stood beside them, the warrior who had given them hope. And so they tried. A mission was formed, a rescue within the One's domain. They infiltrated the ship world where the One lived, a biomechanical monstrosity grown from thousands of conquered minds. Pulsed with thought, every surface was aware, every corridor whispered. Inside, they faced the worst horrors yet. Not monsters with claws, but people they had known, absorbed and reshaped. Memories turned against them, illusions built from pain. And at the core, Axe, bound not by chains but by loss. His own will smothered under layers of others. Tobias reached him first. He spoke not as a hawk, not as a warrior, but as a friend. And slowly, through force of memory and love, something stirred. Axe remembered. He broke the surface. It was enough. They fled with Axe between them. Not whole, not healed, but free. The One survived. It was only the beginning of its expansion. And the Animorphs, now fugitives in a galaxy that didn't know their names, had become the resistance once more. They couldn't go home. Earth was safe for now, but the universe was wide, and danger traveled through stars as easily as through shadows. So they flew on, warriors shaped by pain, friends bound by sacrifice, survivors of a battle no one else would ever truly understand. Because the Animorphs were never about victory. They were about the fight, and the fight would never end. The stars above them no longer held mystery. They held memory, a tapestry of choices, losses, and the flickering light of everything they had sacrificed. Jake sat in quiet command, watching the emptiness stretch forever forward, and knew they could never return to what they were. Not after everything. Each of them bore scars that no time could erase. Marco, behind every quip and every grin, carried the weight of a mother he could never truly grieve. Tobias, silent more often now, flew not for joy but for peace, circling the ship like a ghost with wings. And Axe, though free of the One's grasp, was different. His voice had changed. He hesitated more, looked through people instead of at them. Yet they moved forward, always. The galaxy whispered of something stirring. The One was expanding, quietly, subtly, reaching into the cracks of civilizations, subverting leaders, absorbing outposts. It did not conquer like the Yeerks, seduced. It assimilated. It offered peace, a unity of mind and purpose, and devoured the will to resist. Jake knew what it meant, another war, but this one wasn't about territory. It was about the soul. They became hunters, not of prey, but of signs. They tracked movements, intercepted transmissions, uncovered sleeper colonies already compromised. Sometimes they could save a few. More often, they were too late. The One was efficient, inevitable, a shadow in the mind. On one distant moon, they found a resistance cell, a mix of species, half mad with fear but determined. They welcomed the Animorphs like legends, Stories had spread. Tales of 5 humans and 1 Andalite who had turned the tide of a war on a backwater world. Jake hated it. He wasn't a hero. He was the one who had given the order, the one who had sacrificed his cousin. But they fought alongside these strangers anyway, trained them, equipped them, inspired them, and for a moment, the flame of rebellion grew a little brighter. Axe, when he spoke, often drifted into strange metaphors. He talked about rivers diverging, about stars singing in fractured tones. They worried the one had left something inside him, but he insisted he was whole, just changed. They all were. The mission shifted, no longer just to fight, but to warn, to unite. They became messengers between dying civilizations, calling for unity against the one. Some listened, others turned them away. One world offered them up in exchange for peace, and they barely escaped with their lives. Tobias took a wound during one such escape, not life-threatening, but enough to ground him for days. In the stillness, he spoke more than he had in years, about Elfanger, about Rachel, about the burden of being neither human nor hawk, but something lost in between. Marco sat beside him, silent for once. Jake watched them and thought of Cassie. She was out there, safe, building a better world, believing in healing. He wondered if she ever thought of him, if she still believed he was worth saving. He didn't know, but the memory of her voice steadied him, reminded him of who he had been, who he still could be. Their ship became more than a vessel. It became a symbol. The Blade ship, once feared, now carried a legacy of resistance. Every port they visited added another name, another soul willing to fight. They weren't alone anymore, but neither was the one. It had learned. It had adapted. It began using deception, sending false messages, impersonating friends. On one mission, they were lured into a trap by a voice mimicking Rachel. The pain of that betrayal nearly shattered Jake. But they survived, just barely. They realized then, this was not a war they could win with brute force. The one fed on isolation, on fear, on disconnection. To beat it, they would need to offer something stronger. Hope. And so they began a new campaign, one of truth, of memory. They released their own recordings, told their story to the stars. Let every species hear what had been done and what could still be saved. The truth became their weapon, their armor. The war stretched on, not in climactic battles, but in whispers and rallies, in sacrifices made on forgotten moons, in trust offered and sometimes betrayed. And through it all, the Animorphs kept flying. Because some wars don't end in a single moment. They end when people stop believing they can still fight. And the Animorphs would never stop. The message they spread began to resonate. Across systems, hidden in alleys and encrypted channels, individuals passed along stories of Earth's defenders, of 6 who had once turned the tide. The Animorphs were no longer just soldiers. They were an idea, a spark that lit rebellion across the stars. But even sparks burn out. On the edge of a dying star system, they encountered a vessel drifting without power. Inside, a species they had never seen before, entirely absorbed by the one. Not enslaved, not even aware they had been conquered. Their thoughts were tranquil, their faces serene. The one had perfected its method. There was no resistance because there was no awareness of anything to resist. Jake stood among them, hearing their soft chants of unity and peace, and felt a cold horror settle in. This was worse than war. It was erasure. They withdrew, shaken. Axe spent days analyzing the neural structures of the victims, hoping to find a thread they could use. What he found instead was more disturbing. The one had changed. It no longer relied on hosts. It became them. It rewrote biology, adapted minds. It wasn't just winning. It was evolving, and they were running out of time. Jake sent out a final call, a beacon coded in every known galactic language, telling the truth. Unfiltered, brutal, honest. It named the One, described its reach, exposed its methods. It admitted their own losses, their own failures, and it offered only one thing in return: a chance to stand together before the last lights went out. Some answered, some fell silent, others fought back in their own way. The Animorphs returned to Earth one last time. It was a different world, safer, cleaner. Cassie had helped create sanctuaries for freed Hork-Bajir and even some Yeerks who had chosen exile. Cities were quieter. People no longer looked to the stars with fear, but with longing. Jake didn't stay long. He met Cassie. They spoke briefly. There was love still there, but also too much pain. Too many ghosts. She asked if he was coming home. He said he already had one. They left with a new crew, young, passionate, desperate to make a difference. Jake tried not to see them as replacements. They weren't, but he trained them anyway, just as Elfangor had once trained them. The cycle continued. Axe grew more distant. He spent hours meditating, lost in Andalite philosophy, sometimes sketching strange star maps that didn't match any known charts. Tobias worried. Marco joked. Jake watched. Until one day Axe was gone. No sign of struggle, no message, just a vacant console and one of his star maps etched into the metal wall. They searched for weeks, through space that wasn't charted, across systems no longer speaking. And then they found a whisper. Something ancient had awakened, something even the One feared. It was not just another enemy. It was the One's origin. And Axe had gone to confront it. The Animorphs, old and new, followed, because the fight was never just about victory. It was about each other, about not leaving anyone behind, about standing even when the stars burned low. And somewhere, in that quiet vastness, Jake finally understood. War had taken everything from them, but it had also shown them who they truly were. Not just warriors, but protectors. And protectors never stop. They traced Axe's path by fragments, gravitational anomalies, disrupted communication arrays, lingering pulses in the void. What they discovered was a scar carved into space, a wound that shimmered with energies beyond even Andalite comprehension. It was not a place, it was a tear, a rift where time and memory collapsed into each other. The One had not been born in a laboratory, nor spawned from a single species. It was older. It was the residue of an idea, of unity at the cost of self, of connection without boundaries. A primordial mindscape formed when civilizations reached too far into shared consciousness, seeking to erase loneliness by erasing distinction. Axe had gone into the rift alone, but something had followed him back. Tobias was the first to feel it, a pull behind his eyes, a whisper that felt like his own thoughts, but not quite. Marco started forgetting things. Minor things at first, a mission detail, a joke he'd told yesterday. Then bigger things. Tobias's name, Jake's voice, memories unraveling like threads in water. They quarantined themselves aboard the ship. Cassie arrived unexpectedly, docking in a medical vessel with her own team of scientists. She had received Jake's beacon and had been tracking psychic anomalies across fringe colonies. They compared notes. The pattern was clear. The rift was spreading, and it was infecting not through physical means, but through thought itself. To even know the One was to risk becoming it. They faced a choice: destroy the rift, perhaps sealing away Axe forever, or enter it, risking all to retrieve him and understand what had changed. Jake chose the second path. They entered as one. Inside was not space. It was memory layered infinitely. Earth, the war, Rachel's last cry, Elfanger's dying breath, Cassie's smile, Marco's laughter, Tobias's wings, Axe's voice reciting Andalite lore. Every moment echoed against itself. They found Axe suspended at the center, not imprisoned, not corrupted, transcendent. He had become part of the rift. His form shifted between Andalite and light, mind and code. He spoke in tones not heard but felt, and through him they finally understood. The One was not an enemy to be destroyed. It was a future to be rejected, a seduction of safety, of oneness, of eternal peace without freedom. Axe had stabilized the rift, held its hunger at bay, but he could not close it alone. To do so required will, individuality, resistance. Jake took his hand. One by one, the others followed. Marco, despite fear. Tobias, despite doubt. Cassie, even knowing what it might cost. They joined minds, but not to merge. To anchor, to assert self in the face of unbeing. The rift fought back. It showed them illusions. Rachel alive, Earth untouched. No war, no pain. All lies, all comfort. They held. And then, with a shudder that cracked eternity, the rift collapsed. They woke aboard their ship, disoriented, whole. X was there, changed but present, eyes brighter, voice steadier. He said one word, free. The One was gone, or maybe dormant, maybe waiting, but its path was sealed. The Animorphs didn't return to Earth. Not right away. They visited the worlds they had warned, helped rebuild what had fractured, told their story not as heroes but as a warning. Freedom is not given, it is chosen. And it is chosen every day. Years passed, the galaxy healed in pieces. Jake finally stood beneath Earth's sun once more, older, wiser, the war behind him, the future before. Tobias flew overhead. Marco arrived in a self-piloted cruiser that played bad 80s music. Cassie waited near a sanctuary, flowers in her hair. Axe stood beside them, no longer alien. Family. And for the first time since it all began, they were simply that. Together. Free.